Hey guys, thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to be discussing TOEFL and PTE exams and which one you should be taking. If you find this topic interesting, please keep watching. So I actually ended up taking TOEFL 3 times within a span of maybe a month and a half or so, and I only took PTE once. My goal was to reach a certain number of points for an application I needed to submit, and I just wasn't able to get the right number of points in every section for TOEFL, and I just went to PTE once and I got the score that I needed, so I was done. Can you guys imagine taking TOEFL 3 times? The exam is so exhausting. It's 4 hours long, and every time I had to go in and do it, I was just so not excited about the experience. And PTE personally was so much easier and so much better. Let me go in a bit of a more detail. For my application submission, I needed 118 points on TOEFL or 75 points on PTE. And for TOEFL, they actually had a breakdown of how many points you needed to get in each section. And even if your score was even higher than 118, but you were lacking 1 point in a section that they wanted you to have that 1 point, it didn't matter. Your score was not acceptable. I actually ended up getting 119 points out of the 120 each of the 3 times I took the exam. But funnily enough, every time I was lacking 1 point in a section where I had to have that point. It started with me having 29 out of 30 in the writing section where I needed to have 30, and then when I finally got the 30 out of 30 in the writing section, I had 29 out of 30 or 24 out of 25 in the listening section, whereas I had to have that point. So you can imagine how frustrating it was to be taking that exam so many times. So now that you guys know a bit of a backstory of why I took these exams and why I had to take TOEFL so many times, let's jump into the actual overview of the exams. Let's start with TOEFL. TOEFL is a very commonly known exam, and it's internationally recognized, where the scores are accepted in almost all of the universities and immigration offices, and it's primarily for people with the American way of speaking. So as you know, IELTS is more British, I guess, oriented, as well as PTE. And TOEFL is quite exhausting. It's 4 hours long. TOEFL has 4 sections. There is a listening section, reading section, speaking section, and writing section. Every section is structured a certain way with a certain amount of questions that are being asked. And the number of minutes that you spend on every section can also vary depending on whether they decide to offload it on the reading section and give you an extra paragraph to read, or if they decide to offload it on the listening section. The speaking section and the writing sections are always the same. So you always start off with the reading section, where you're given 3 to 4 paragraphs to read with about 12 to 14 questions after each paragraph. And then you jump into the listening sections, where you're given 4 to 6 recordings to listen to. Always includes about 4 lectures and 2 conversations, one of which is on campus, and about 6 questions to answer after the listening section. Then after you're done with these 2 sections, you have a mandatory break. So why I'm saying it's a mandatory break, you can't just opt out of the break and say I'm going to continue doing my exam. You have to leave the room, you have to take full 10 minutes, you cannot come back earlier, and then after you come back, you can start with the speaking and writing section. Speaking section always has 6 different tasks. There's 2 independent speaking tasks, there is 4 integrated speaking tasks. 2 of which is just you listening and then speaking, and then 2 last ones, you have to read something, you have to listen to something, and then you have to express an opinion or comparison for those things that you listen to. Last but not least, the writing section. I personally was mostly scared about the writing section because I think it's the most imprecisely scored section, because it's so easy to detect points based on sentence structure or vocabulary used and a bunch of other things. So for instance, the first time I took TOEFL, that's the section where I got 29 out of 30, and the rest of my sections were absolutely perfect, and I was just so pissed because I had to take the exam again because I needed 30 points in the writing section. However, so the writing section has 1 task which is integrated, where you have to read something and then listen to the lecture on the same topic, and then at the end you have to compare the two, or kind of say like why the reading contradicts the listening part. And then the last is the actual independent essay, where they give you a topic or question and it's completely free form. You have to basically answer in an essay form that question or elaborate on your opinion. Then afterwards you're done. You just spend 4 hours in this most likely cold room writing this exam, and now you can spend a week or so waiting for your scores to come, probably stressing out, hoping they're good. As far as the TOEFL prep goes, I can definitely speak about it more in a completely separate video, but the best book that I personally used for the prep is this official guide to TOEFL. It's a book that is probably most commonly seen and most commonly used. I found it super helpful and I would definitely recommend it for the prep. Let's now jump into the PTE overview. PTE is becoming more widely accepted, just recently having been accepted in Australian and New Zealand immigration, as well as it is also accepted in a bunch of universities. And PTE has more of a scientific focus than TOEFL. TOEFL has a broad spectrum of topics and broad variety of lectures that you're presented to read or listen to, where PTE is very specific to numbers, lectures that are related to STEM, so scientific subjects. And PTE is also completely computer marked. So the exam is completely scored by a computer. PTE is about 2.5 to 3 hours long, where TOEFL is almost always 4 hours, so quite a big difference. And PTE has 3 sections instead of 4 sections in TOEFL. So PTE has speaking and writing section combined. It has a reading section and a listening section. And every section gets evaluated out of the 90 available points. And at the end, the overall score is also out of 90 points. So it's kind of like an average score of all of the scores that you got in each section. As far as the individual section goes, speaking and writing has a bunch of read this text, repeat this sentence aloud, you listen to something and you have to write it down, you have to summarize text, and you have to write an essay. You also have to describe an image, and an image is most likely a graph of some sort, and that's pretty much it for speaking and writing. So the reading section is somewhat different but also quite similar to TOEFL, where you have questions that are just select multiple choice. You have fill in blanks, where it's a test of your vocabulary knowledge. And you also have a section where you have to reorder paragraphs to basically give a good summary of what you just read. In the listening section, you will have tasks like summarizing spoken text, writing from dictation, highlighting the correct summary, highlighting correct words, filling in blanks as well, then selecting multiple choice, and as well as selecting a missing word. So from this overview, you can probably already tell that the tests are somewhat different, but also have some overlap in them. In TOEFL, you probably will not see things like summarizing text from dictation. The common source that is used for PTE prep is this PTE academic guide to preparing for an exam. I found it a fantastic source, and everything is explained there, how to prepare for each section, what kind of questions there are going to be. So as well as the official TOEFL guide, I found this to be the solo source that I actually needed to prepare for PTE. Now let me elaborate on how much time I spent preparing for each of the exams. I spent about 2 weeks studying this book for TOEFL, and I spent about a week studying this book for PTE, and I took PTE after I took TOEFL. Why I spent so little time studying for TOEFL was because I took the exam a really long time ago, about 6 years ago, and I actually went to school to Canada, so my actual knowledge of English, I would say, was already pretty good. Well, in fact, I'm actually fluent in English, so I didn't really have to study the actual language. However, I really drilled down on studying the structure of the exam, because I find that even if you're a native speaker, unless you're familiar with the structure of the exam, you will most likely not get a super high score. You will not get 120 out of 120 for TOEFL because, as well as 90 for the PTE, because every exam has its own structure that is required to study completely separately and just memorize in certain things. And as I said, I studied about a week for PTE, and I also studied just completely the structure of the exams. That's why a week was enough for me, considering I already took TOEFL 3 times, and I was honestly so done with taking these exams that I just wanted to take this as soon as possible, and I only spent a week on it. And as I have mentioned before, after I took PTE, I just got 90 out of 90, which is the maximum score, and I was completely done because that's all I needed for the application I had to submit. So from personal experience, having taken TOEFL 3 times and still not getting the score that I needed, I found PTE to be way easier. Even tasks-wise, stuff like reading a sentence out loud or writing stuff from dictation, it's so much easier than a lot of the tasks in TOEFL. And the format of the exam I also found to be much less tiring because it was only 2.5 to 3 hours versus 4 hours in TOEFL. TOEFL is really exhausting. Even though I personally don't get stressed in the exam environment, so I'm not kind of like nervous, oh my god, I'm in an exam, I have to do my best. Like, I know I have to do my best, but I'm just kind of like chilling, not stressing out. But I still found PT to be much less stressful just because it was much shorter too. To be honest, like, no matter how well you're prepared for TOEFL, after like 3 hours, it's quite hard to think, and it's just hard to sit in this room and write stuff down and still have your brain think about the same topic. Also, I actually found the scoring on PTE to be much lighter than the scoring on TOEFL because, as I said, I ended up getting 90 on PTE, which is the maximum score. However, my impression from the actual exam, like, you know, when you walk out of the room and you're like, okay, did I screw it up or did I do a great job? I didn't think I would have gotten 90. I thought I kind of like screwed up on the listening section where I didn't listen to something properly. I kind of zoned out and I thought I didn't select the right answer. Luckily, what I found out is that I got an absolutely perfect score. So judging from my personal perception of how I did on the exam and the score that I got, my conclusion is that PTE scored easier than TOEFL did. Because TOEFL, most of the times, and again, I took it 3 times, my feeling of how I did on TOEFL was pretty accurate in the score representation. So in terms of the speed of how quickly you get the reports of how you scored on each of the exam, PTE was also faster. I got my report within 1 to 2 days, whereas for TOEFL, and I took the internet-based TOEFL, I should have pointed that out, it wasn't the paper-based, I had to wait about a week or a week and a half for my scores every single time. And that speaks to, if you screwed up, you kind of, with PT, you kind of know right away, and then you have more time to prepare and to reschedule an exam. Now let's talk about pricing. The pricing for PT and TOEFL is actually almost the same. I paid $195 for TOEFL each time I took TOEFL, so to do the math, you can imagine that I almost spent $1,000 on taking this exam. And PT is $200, so price is almost completely fully comparable. So now, having taken TOEFL 3 times and PT just once, personally, I wish I would have found out about PT earlier. And it's really funny because it was my dad who was like, hey, you've taken this exam referring to TOEFL so many times and you still don't have the score that you wanted. Are you sure there is no other exam you can take? And I actually knew about PTE right from the beginning that it was an option, but I didn't really want to spend time prepping for it and didn't want to take it because I thought, oh, I've taken TOEFL 6 years ago, I'm kind of fairly familiar with the structure, it's a more common exam, so there is way more resources to prepare for it. So I was really set on just retaking TOEFL until I got the score that I needed. So then, as I said, my dad was like, yeah, if there is another exam that you can take, maybe you should look into that because after all, like, you've spent so much money on this exam already, maybe you should try something else and who knows. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I'm not really losing anything by trying a different exam, even though there was already like so much time invested into TOEFL. I decided, okay, let me get this PTE academic prep guide and read more about the exam, and then just screw it, just do it. And I'm so happy I did PTE because, to be honest, I'm not really sure I would have gotten the score that I needed again, having taken TOEFL, let's say, the fourth time. So to conclude, I personally found PTE to be a much better experience for multiple reasons. One, the exam overall, I think, is much easier than TOEFL. Two, the exam is also shorter than TOEFL, so you're less exhausted by the end of it and you have more brain power to still think about the exam. Three, the price is pretty much the same, $195 versus $200 for PTE. For the resources for PTE are actually less elaborate than the resources for TOEFL, but they're still good resources and I found them to be sufficient. And five, the scoring was easier, the scoring was faster, and I can see why in a lot of cases it would be a very selling point, just getting the scores faster. So if you guys, university, college, school, program, immigration, country, whatever, accepts PTE, I would actually strongly recommend looking into it and potentially taking it. Again, it comes from my personal experience, but I found it easier and just a smoother, better, faster experience. I wish you guys good luck on your exam. I'm sure you will kill it. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe. If you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, leave them in the section down below. I would love to hear what helped you take TOEFL or PTE and what maybe prepping tips you have. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great week. And for now, bye.